I did grow a beard over Christmas, but I shaved it before anybody saw it in public.
I would have paid money to see that.
Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm Tanya Cook, Chairperson of the Metropolitan Utilities District Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome you all to the committee meetings this morning, February 1st, 2023. This meeting is being live streamed from the boardroom at the M.U.D headquarters building located at 7350 World Communications Drive, and a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the M.U.D website after the meeting's conclusion. Safety briefing. I'd like to invite our Vice President of Safety and Security, Shane Hunter, to provide a briefing regarding protocol for all individuals in attendance at the board meeting today in the event of an emergency.
Good morning, Shane Hunter, Vice President of Safety and Security. We're on the first floor here at M.U.D headquarters today, and normal entry and exit is through the rear of the room. There's also another exit for us here on this side of the room, and it's on the other side of this door in that hallway we'll find the nearest fire extinguisher, first aid kit, and AED. With the location of that AED in mind, can I have a show of hands of who's CPR and AED trained in the room? Thank you. Should there be a medical emergency today, 911 will be notified by the security desk, who will then escort EMS personnel into this space upon their arrival. If we need to leave this space for any reason today and evacuate the building, we will use this door on this side of the room, take two lefts, and reconvene in the parking garage where we'll conduct an accountability. That concludes the safety briefing.
Thank you very much. Roll call.
Bagley,
Here.
Cook,
Here.
Friend,
Here.
Sidzik,
Here.
McGowan,
Here.
Howard,
Here.
Kavanaugh.
Here.
I'd like to advise all those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available on the wall in the back of the boardroom. Okay, construction and operations. Senior Vice President and Chief Operations Officer Gina Langle will review the capital expenditures.
Good morning. Gina Langle, Senior Vice President, Chief Operations Officer. Behind tab 5 is our capital expenditures letter. There are only two items on this letter, and I will cover both of them this month. Let's see, can you guys see the capital expenditures map in front of you?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Well, not on this.
Not there? Okay, there it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
So under system improvements, item number 1, it's in subdivision number 7, as you can see on this map, for $254,100. It's to install a 930 feet of 4-inch and 6-inch gas main and install a regulator station at 15th Street and Cornhusker Road. This authorization is for replacing a gas valve and relocating the gas main in Cornhusker near the Kennedy Freeway Express overpass, or near the overpass. Mr. Roberts, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. As you can see in this map, the blue portion of this is where we will be abandoning some gas main. You can see that it is in the street of Cornhusker Road there. We're going to be moving it out of the pavement. The gas and the gas main are about 16 feet in major paving, which makes the maintenance and repair work exceptionally challenging, slow, and expensive, and also has some safety concern. This project will relocate a gas main and valve to the standard depth outside the pavement. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. As you can see from this one, where the guardrails are right there, the actual vault cover for the valve is underneath that, so that will be moved outside. And then the next slide, please. And right now, that is where our regulator stations are sitting at this time. And then the next slide, thank you. We're proposing to put it back so that it's out away from the street. And finally, the last one, this is approximately what it will look like when we're actually complete with it. The existing main in Cornhusker was installed in 1969, 2 decades before the construction of the expressway and the associated Cornhusker Road overpass, on-ramps and off-ramps that added fill to the existing main. The project will replace the below-ground regulator station, as I showed in that slide, with an above-ground regulator station due to the depth and the water intrusion of the existing vaults. Importantly, safety will be enhanced during these maintenance operations, and combining the gas main relocation and the regulator station replacement will result in a cost and public impact reductions. We're planning on doing this work starting in July of 2023. The next item,
Gina,
oh yes.
On that project there, I assume what you're doing, putting that new line in, are you just going to abandon the other one in place so you don't have to tear up the
Yes.
concrete and everything?
Yes, that is
Well,
correct.
You shut it off. Do you have to get the gas out of there or let it?
Yes, yes, we do get that out.
How do you get it out? Just shut it off and just let it?
No, most of the time when we purge gas mains, we use air to push that through, from that. So we will get the gas out from that, doing that. And so, and we'll abandon it in place so we don't have to do anything with the concrete there.
Good, thank you.
Okay, the next item is under building plants and equipment. It's you can find that on page 2. This will also be talked by Mr. Zellers when he talks about the bid letter in just a little bit. It is for $779,000 or $779,350. I'm not saying that very well today. Let me try that one more time here. $779,350 to replace roofs at Rainwood Pump Station, Skyline Pump Station, and the Walnut Hill Engine Building. These roofs, the facilities are in poor condition and are in need of replacement. Planned repairs for 2022 were delayed 1 year due to budget restraints. The roof ages for Rainwood, it's 29 years old. For Skyline, it's 31 years old. And for the Walnut Hill Engine Building, it's 23 years old. In 2020, facilities completed an evaluation of all the district roofs and developed a 5-year replacement plan, and all of these are on that plan for replacement. And the replacements are included in the 2023 budget. Yes.
I'm glad to hear that we're preserving the Walnut Hill Engine Building, as it's called. Was that roof one of those old terracotta roofs? Oh, sorry, thank you. Shall I start again? I'm really glad, I really appreciate that we're going to preserve the Walnut Hill Engine Building house. Was that roof one of those old terracotta?
I don't know the answer to that. Mr. Zellers, do you know by chance?
I've seen it, and it's really an amazing little structure.
Good morning, John Zellers, Vice President, Procurement and Enterprise Services. That particular roof is a flat roof, and it's just an EPDM style roof. What you're referring to is probably the more historical one that's a brick building.
Right.
This is, I believe, just a metal building that was installed quite a few years afterwards.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Gina, could
Yes.
you define the difference for me between the reservoir building, which we're not using, correct? We're not using the Walnut
That has
Hill
been
Reservoir,
decommissioned.
and the engine building. Are we using that engine as a part of the repump system?
So the pump station at Walnut Hill is still active. We use the pump station, and these engines are backup natural gas engines that we can utilize if we need for the pump station itself. There's also a smaller engine in there that we can utilize for lighting if we need to, if we were to lose power.
Okay, so that is still a functional part of our water distribution
Yes.
system,
Yes, it
even though
is.
the reservoir is not.
Correct.
Thank you.
You know, maybe a little follow-up, Mark Doyle, President. Gina, you or Mike, could you talk about the future of that pump station? We had a little additional discussion about it and looked at it a little differently when we were talking about Lincoln. I don't know if you want to give I don't mean to call past you, you might handle that.
No, that's fine. It is decommissioned right now. As with any assets that we have, we continually look to see if there's a reason for us to utilize that for future plans. At this time, we're unsure, quite frankly, about whether or not it would make sense to bring that back, or whether we would sell the property. And so what our plans are right now are to continue to evaluate and look and see if there's a purpose for that.
And the reason that's important is we've had plenty of discussions with the neighborhood on what would happen to the property if we would not just decommission, which we've done. What would happen if that would be cleared? Who would clear it? Who would pay for the demolition of the reservoir? But then, but by the way, there's this pump station you're asking about. So, I mean, we can't just say we're ready to scrap it.
We continue to look at that, and we work with we look at multiple factors for that. And obviously, any decisions we would have, we bring back to the board for consideration.
at one time, that was the west end of our system, so. It was, yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Any further questions?
thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President of Water Operations, Mike Koenig, will present the proposed consultant selection for the Platte South Capital Improvement Plan.
Good morning, everyone. Mike Koenig, Vice President of Water Operations. Behind tab number 6, you'll find the consultant selection letter for the architectural engineering design phase services and construction phase services for the administration building and site entrance improvements at the Platte South Water Production Facility. In 2022, we completed a capital improvement plan, sometimes referred to as a CIP, for the Platte South Water Treatment Facility, which identified several projects to be completed between 2023 and 2033, more or less a 10-year project. We looked at a full comprehensive engineering review of the plant, a condition assessment. We looked at such things as resiliency of the facility, capacity, future regulatory needs. Those types of things were all baked into the final capital improvement plan. The goals of this project include accommodating current and future operational needs, better accessibility to restrooms and conference areas, as well as making sure that as we embark on the rest of the improvements that we've got, matching and proper site entrance and security features that match our other facilities, so that we can make sure that we're properly screening not only the consultants and contractors that are coming in, but also district staff as well. The selection is for Jackson & Jackson. They are a local architecture firm here in Omaha. They have recent experience with several projects that are very similar to what we're doing at Platte South. So in their interviews and their presentation, they did very well because of this. They provided very good examples of site entrance layout and how we can improve and handling future deliveries and those types of needs that the plant will have. They also just so happen to be less costs and hours than the other proposals that we received, making them the best choice. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions that you all may have.
I don't know if this would be a question for you, Mike. Maybe it would be more of a Mark question. At one time, and I thought it had been discontinued, there was a employee-involved social club. And I'm not commenting on whether that was good or bad. At one time, I think it was a great option for employees. But does that club still function at Platte South?
It does not. That club has since dissolved and is no longer part of the districts.
I just didn't know if that was something that updated security features would have considered or not, but it sounds like it's moot if the club no longer exists.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one other thing I want to point out is that we anticipate, as the design is complete, we anticipate the construction contract will follow later this year or early next year for, what the design actually comes up with.
I guess the only I'm glad you asked that, because those things aren't easy. And one day they may be appropriate, another day they're not. So that's history now. But in terms of capital improvement plans, I want to commend the staff on bringing this together. A lot of this board has been working on one or approving one for Florence for a long time now. I don't know when that really started, but
Roughly 2010.
so and it's not just not to be surprised, but we've tried to reform the budget process to more go to a capital improvement plan, so we can do 5-year projections with more accuracy. And it's not fair to staff to bring things onesie, twosie, and then we're surprised. I think some of the capital expenditures Director Cook noticed that are these surprises. So we're trying to the best of our ability to reorganize in a way where we're trying to put everything together to the best of our ability. There still may be surprises. So we thank you for your support on this, and also the accounting area and finance area. It's really good teamwork that we can kind of see into the future on these things. So thank you for that.
Very true, Mark.
Well
Thank
done.
you for those comments.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Right. Director of Plant Engineering, Stephanie Henn, will review the acceptance of contracts and payments, final estimates.
Thank you. Stephanie Henn, Director of Plant Engineering. I will be addressing the finals letter this morning behind tab number 7. We have 4 finals this month, 1 water development project, 2 gas infrastructure projects, and 1 plant project. I'd like to touch on item A, which is our plant project, replacing the boilers at our Platte South water treatment plant. Contractor was Hayes Mechanical. There is a small change order associated with this project that's approximately 3% over the project cost, and approving this final also approves this change order. Also wanted to touch on items B and C, which are 2 gas infrastructure projects. This is part of our gas IR replacement program. As you recall, Q3 Contracting has been our contracted partner. There were 7 projects in 2022, but only 1 contract associated with this work. These are the first 2 finals from this body of work from 2022. There were significant deducts on both of these projects due to the projects being estimated in a worst-case scenario. Clarification then came from the city after the project prices were negotiated and the mains could be laid outside of paving, saving these costs. After this year, we anticipate that the final numbers will be closer to the final estimates going forward as the city stipulations have now been established with us. And that was all I was going to touch on unless there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President of Procurement and Enterprise Services, John Zellers, will now review the bids and materials and contracts.
All right, good morning again. John Zellers, Vice President, Procurement and Enterprise Services. Bids on materials and contracts may be found under tab 8. There are several items that I plan to discuss this morning, and the first may be found at the top of page 2. We are asking for the ratification of the low bid from Hawkins Construction to conduct the water main infrastructure replacement work in a joint contract with the City of Omaha's Street Improvement Project on Grover from 50th to 60th Street. District work will replace approximately 3,700 feet of 16-inch cast iron water mains. As has been shared with the board in the past, the district will joint contract water main replacements with City of Omaha Street Improvement and CSO projects. There are several advantages to joint contracting, including a lower overall project cost, reduction in the time to complete the project, more efficient scheduling of work, less adverse impacts to adjacent property, and less adverse impacts to the traveling public. In addition, the district would not be responsible for any barricading, paving repairs, or restoration costs, as this would be paid for by the city. We accepted bids for the roof replacements of the Rainwood Pump Station, Skyline Pump Station, and Walnut Hill Engine Building that Ms. Langle spoke about earlier. The board may recall back in October a recommendation to reject a single bid for the replacement of the Rainwood and Skyline Pump Station roofs as the bid exceeded budget. At that time, the bid was $864,800 for those 2 roofs. The current low bid is approximately 26% less and includes the additional roof replacement of the Walnut Hill Engine Building. The low bid from Anderson Enterprises is below budget and is below what we budgeted in 2022 as well. We believe holding off and bidding these roofs this winter provided more favorable bids. Anderson's bid is recommended for approval. The next 2 items may be found at the bottom of page 2. The first is the recommendation to approve 4 Kubota R430 articulating tractors with backhoe to replace units that have reached a point that they are no longer economical to maintain. Kubota is the only manufacturer that offers this type of articulating tractor, which allows our crews to operate in tight places, minimizing disturbance and restoration. Kubota's bid represents an 8.7% increase over the same units purchased last year. This purchase will complete the final phase of the replacement plan for these type of units. The second is for the recommendation to approve 2 mini excavators for construction. Last July, we received bids for mini excavators in which 4 bids were received. Kubota was the low bidder at that time. Kubota has agreed to extend their pricing with a nominal price increase of $741.19 per unit, which is approximately a 1% increase and remains less than the second low bid that we received last July. The last item I plan to discuss may be found at the end of the letter on page 3. We are recommending an extension of the contract with Backlund Plumbing to perform cross-bore inspections. Backlund has been successfully performing this type of work for the district for almost a decade. They have agreed to extend the contract at the same pricing and terms currently in place. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
John, I just want to say thanks. I did it in an email, but thanks to Sherry Meisinger for her report on when she laid out all the bidders and how many they've won, each one of them. It's good to be transparent like that, and it's great to see a report like that once in a while.
Definitely appreciate that. I'll pass it on.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Senior Vice President and General Counsel Mark Mendenhall will review the proposed interlocal agreement with the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Mark Mendenhall, Senior Vice President, General Counsel. Behind tab 9, you'll find a recommendation to authorize the district to enter into an interlocal with Nebraska's Department of Health and Human Services. This is an annual renewal. We've gone through this every year that I've been here. This is essentially an interlocal allowing the district certification pursuant to the Safe Drinking Water Act. We, and I believe Director McGowan raised this with me last year, is it possible that instead of 1 year, we can do a 2 or 3 year term? We raised that with DHHS this year a little bit. They needed a little bit more time than what we were given, and so the suggestion, or at least the plan right now, is that we'll discuss the steps that DHHS needs to do in order to go through their chain, and starting in about October. So ideally in January of '24, I'm bringing the same agreement, but for a 3-year term. So with that, any questions that you may have? Okay.
Seeing none, thank you very much, Mark. Services and Extensions Vice President of Engineering Masania will review the proposed main extensions.
Good morning, Masania, Vice President of Engineering. Behind tab 10, I'll be speaking to you about the main extensions letter. This month we have 2 water main extensions and 2 gas main extensions. As you can see in the map being shared, the 2 water main extensions are in subdivisions 3 and 7. These main extensions have an impact of water service to and fire protection to 130 residential lots as well as 7 commercial lots. The impact of the gas main extension includes service to 92 residential lots, 2 multifamily, 11 commercial lots, and 1 school. As you can see, these are both located in Subdivision 4. Turning to page 2, I'd like to highlight the water main extension for UNMC Saddle Creek campus, which is at the top of the page, number 1. The map being shown is part of this is showing the project's the main extension through the redevelopment of the old Omaha Steel Company site near 46th and Farnham. This campus renovation includes a 12-inch PVC water main extension, and this water main is being installed under our WCD water main installation policy, the WCD standing for Water Construction Developer. And this is where the developer will be contracting the installation of the water main that we see every so often. The developer is utilizing this process to expedite the installation of the water main due to their aggressive schedule with getting the site developed. This is bypassing the advertising and bidding schedule, collapsing the overall schedule for the water main installation. So the developer will be negotiating prices with one of our approved water main contractors and reimbursing us for our design, inspection, and water testing work. Again, there are no district costs associated with these main extensions, and the construction is anticipated to occur in 2023 and 2024.
Mas, I have a question. Have we ever done this before?
A WCD?
That thing where you described collapsing the schedule and getting reimbursed?
We have. We've had a number of those go through in 2022, just given some of the challenges with supply chain, and we have had developers utilize the WCD.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, Director Cook, Mark Doyle, President, I'd like to put just a little perspective on that. I don't remember what year it was, but early in my board tenure, several developers approached the board and said, we'd really rather go around you and work with contractors ourselves understanding that part of that process never goes away because it's still our system. So when you say reimburse for that work, we do the design, we do the approvals. Do we do the inspections?
We do the inspection.
So the process is the same in that regard, but they are able to work with contractors around us. And as you said, negotiate prices. It doesn't happen much because it really didn't work out as they expected. Maybe this time it will, and maybe there's not as big a concern for saving costs, but most of the time, this is my opinion, but it might be fact, Masa, it is more cost effective for us just to do the whole process,
Yeah.
which is why we have very few of these.
Yeah, having a competitive bid environment with all of our approved contractors just helps and SIDs are utilize that method, the low bid advertising method often.
But we were willing to accommodate, and it worked out, and haven't heard from them since. I'd also like to point out on these projects, you'll notice in the water side, there's 0 MUD cost. I heard some testimony yesterday, and one of the comments was, well, every project that involves, I don't know if it was specifically about water, has economic development positive aspects to it. But water's developer driven, and of course this might have an economic development aspect to it, but these are economic development projects, plain and simple. And so, I mean, an SID was used as an example, and we would not have the expense for an SID, but of course homes are purchased and property taxes are paid and all those things. So yeah, I think you know why I'm bringing that up. This is clearly how our policies work, and we don't see any difference in other projects that are coming our way.
Right.
Sometimes it is our cost, and I think an example of that was the joint project with the City of Omaha that we discussed earlier. That's a road improvement project, correct?
That is.
I want to make sure I'm accurate here.
It is.
And that is our cost. And since those mains were targeted to be replaced eventually, there is a chance that the priority might be moved up because the City of Omaha is replacing the road from 50th to 60th and Grover. Fair?
Right, yep.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to highlight there is, beyond this main extension request seeking your approval, the engineering team is looking at the surrounding area outside of this private development for opportunities to make improvements to our system. We're looking at replacing some cast iron gas mains, and that is to minimize the impact to the public in that area. Again, it's outside of this private development project area, so it's, our engineering team, as we, like the Grover Street joint contract, we're looking at, okay, is there an opportunity to get in there, upgrade gas or water mains? And in Saddle Creek, we have had a problematic gas main. That's been on our radar for replacement. The water main's broken 10 times, but we knew with this project and how large it was, there's a potential for Saddle Creek to be relocated, the roadway. There's been talks about that. So we didn't want to get ahead of it and put our new mains at risk of relocation. So we held off on it, and that's part of the evaluation that the engineering team's looking at.
And it's not done willy-nilly. The consequence of failure on Saddle Creek is significant because you have the possibility of putting UNMC out of energy products. So thank you for that. This is a very pertinent discussion. This happens every month, but it's a little more meaningful right now. Yeah. Thank you, Mas.
For the gas main extensions, on number 1, Iron Bluff Phase 1, this has a district contribution of $38,856 to oversize some 2-inch mains to 4-inch. And this is to more efficiently serve future growth in the area. Each of the Iron Bluff subdivision phases, number 1 and number 2 on the letter for the gas mains, have a total deficiency of $18,665 that the developer has agreed to pay. And that is all I have to cover for the main extensions.
Thank you very much. All right, personnel. Vice President of Human Resources, Bonnie Savine, will review employee wage and/or salary increases and ratifications. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Bonnie Savine, Vice President, Human Resources. I will start with a recap of employee counts. for the end of January in both 2022 and 23. On January 31st, 2022, there were 814 regular full-time employees, 3 regular part-time employees for a total of 817. To end this January, we had 868 regular full-time employees and 3 regular part-time employees for a total of 871. And Mr. McGowan, that put us at 96.5% staffed, according to our budget for 2023. We also had 7 temporary part-time employees. 4 of those were interns. The other are temporary part-timers. A review of jobs actively in various stages of the job placement process is as follows. We have 4 jobs that are currently routing through the requisition process for approval. In addition to that, we do have some summer hire requisitions that are going through the process. That will start ramping up here at the beginning here of this month. We also have 10 jobs that are posted now, and those are all external jobs. You'll see those on the screen there in front of you. 5 of those are intern positions, and the other 5 are regular positions. We also have 15 jobs that have applications in the review or interview stages now, and then we have 6 jobs that have 6 selected candidates going through background check and drug screen and onboarding processes. So that is a look at the job landscape. If you look at tab 11, you will see the letter for wage and or salary increases and ratifications. It's a short letter this month after a couple months of long letters. We have just 1 employee on the letter. We are requesting the Board of Directors approve the salary increase for 1 SPA employee this month due to promotion. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Judicial and Legislative Governmental Relations Attorney Rick Kubat will present the first legislative report for 2023.
Good morning. The first report mentions this is the long session or the 90-day session, meaning that bills introduced this year, if they're not indefinitely postponed, last over the 2-year cycle. Pardon me. This session is tentatively set to adjourn on June 9th. Provided in front of you is a listing of bills. Not included in this list, there are numerous other legislative proposals that may be added onto this list as the session evolves. I'm going to get into the bill listings right away. Please feel free to interrupt me as I'm going through the legislative descriptions. I'm going to skip the first page and move on to page 2 and go to LB 122, which was introduced by Senator Bosselman. This bill had a hearing yesterday. I was able to catch the second part of that hearing. It makes pretty substantial changes to one call. Under current law, the State Fire Marshal's Office does investigations as it relates to matters specifically for only natural gas. This proposal would allow the State Fire Marshal's Office essentially to investigate all one-call utility violations, bringing in fiber, water, sewer, electric, everything under the One Call Act. More importantly than that, what it essentially does is it sets up a hit court. The State Fire Marshal's Office would do the investigation, and then if there was a recommendation for fines or penalties, it would go to essentially a hit court. That hit court is made up of 2 excavators, 2 operators, and either the State Fire Marshal or their designee. That hit court would then make a determination on whether or not fines or penalties up to $10,000, or they could order basically continuing one-call education courses. Anything that would be above $10,000 would still go through the current process, which is directly from the State Fire Marshal's Office to the Attorney General's office. What I was able to surmise with the bill hearing yesterday is that this bill is likely a work in progress, and we're expecting some changes in the bill and some further clarification on how this process would work. Moving on, the next bill on the list that I wanted to briefly discuss was LB 161 from Senator McDonald. And what that bill does is it prohibits employers from having tracking devices on their employees. I did have a conversation with Senator McDonald to notify him that the district is similarly situated to a ton of other employers where we track our vehicles with our key fobs. We also have the capability of tracking cell phones, and Senator McDonald indicated that LB 161 is not intended to track employer property. And that item was brought up in the committee hearing, and I'm pretty confident should that bill move forward at all, there would be further clarification. This is, you know, you put a button on an employee and you can track their comings and going 24/7 on where they're going in terms of being an employee.
So specifically, it says wearing them. Is that to be taken literally?
That's my understanding in listening to the committee hearing. Basically, that you'd put a tracking device on your employee.
So could you describe what's the technology we are using for the tracking again?
Yes, so we have key fobs. So when a district employee drives a district car, you basically, to be able to start the car, you put the key fob in, and it tracks the fact that, you know, employee Joe Smith is driving vehicle 161, and the technology provides us the ability to track vehicles. And there, you know, there's a lot of good reasons why the district employs that technology. One, some district employees, as I understand it, for efficiency purposes, might have their vehicle overnight, especially for some of those employees that might be on call 24/7. And so it's also important that the district be able to track our vehicles.
Yes, I definitely see that importance, but is that key fob tracked outside of being in the vehicle? So is that what initiates it, is when you turn on the vehicle, then it starts the track, and then when you shut the vehicle off, the tracking stops? Or
That's correct. Okay. I mean, and safety and security can come up here and correct me if I'm wrong, but the only time it's tracking you is when you've started the vehicle, when the car started. Once the vehicle's shut off, there to my knowledge, there is no tracking.
Okay, thank you.
Rick, do we monitor these? We got tracking these vehicles, know they're going on a site or whatever. Is there someone that monitors that every day, or you have flags that report something? That's a lot of activity for the district, you know, for the information. How do you manage it?
Can I take this one, Rick? I'll take this one. Mark Doyle, President. District managers have the ability to look at GPS information. Actually, the key fob's just a trigger to say Mark's got the car, but the technology's on the car. It's just GPS, like anybody. You know, our brand may be different, or our vendor, but it's the same thing. Yeah, we have the ability to take a look at a vehicle. We can monitor hard braking, speed limits, all those sort of things. And if you ever see a district vehicle on the road, you'll notice a sticker on the back that says, this vehicle is GPS tracked and I drive the speed limit or under, and it's been a really good thing. Where it's really come in handy, because it's always, you know, it's not easy for an employer or employees to understand why you might do this. Our employees often get wrongly accused of a lot of things, and that we've been able to show, no, that vehicle wasn't there, that vehicle wasn't going 80 miles an hour down the, so it's really worked out. In my opinion, some could disagree, that we're able to defend our employees. And if something is wrong, we know it and we address it. So the answer is yes, we have the ability. Do we look at it every day, every minute? Probably not. And it would be more important for different areas where, our water quality folks drive around town and take water samples, and it's very important that we know that happened. And so I'll just say it's different for different areas.
Isn't this, didn't this go a long way toward us being able to reduce our window for service appointments?
Absolutely.
We can more effectively and efficiently deploy vehicles to be in that 2-hour window instead of 4 or 6 hours.
Thank you for that. That's the Tim Cavanaugh 2-hour window. So this came about with the previous president and I considering whether we should allow take-home vehicles where you can start from home in field services, for example. And the compromise by, the employees wanted to be able to do that, and it's worked out very well. And we thought, well, if we're able to install GPS and we work together on this, we can use take-home vehicles, and that's exactly right. And now we have the ability to have, our employees are naturally geographically dispersed around the service territory. So yes, it's helped a lot, and I'll take a little moment to say that we are hitting that 2-hour window almost all the time, and I get positive feedback by customers often about that, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Rick, on 161, it shows that does that mean that January 30th, the Business and Labor Committee had a hearing, or was it assigned to B&L on the 30th?
No, they've had the hearing on the bill.
Did you attend that hearing?
I watched it.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I did. In the specific issue that we're talking about, the exemption for district property, it was alluded in that hearing that there's no intent for whether it's vehicles or cell phones to be part of LB 161.
This is a little off the topic, and I don't know if this was intended, but I'm just curious, were there any law enforcement there testifying? Because body cameras track location when they're recording. I don't know if he intended to stop that, because body cameras, police or any other body cameras track location when they're recording. I read this to say you can't do that. Just curious. I mean, I can address that.
And Dave, I haven't had a conversation with Senator McDonald, but I would imagine that one of his aims is, I've heard a number of nightmarish stories about Amazon warehouse employees, for example, getting tracked throughout the day and going to the bathroom.
I don't disagree with what he's doing. I just want to make sure he understands the consequences that might be unintended of introducing language that says you can't do it.
Unintended consequences, absolutely, yeah.
To my knowledge, no, and if that's incorrect, I'll get back to you, but I don't believe law enforcement attended that hearing.
Thank you.
Well, I am going to move on to LB 171. Every year, the Urban Affairs Committee picks a chapter in state statute under their jurisdiction to update and remove obsolete language. Unfortunately for the district, this was our year to be up. This is every state statute related to the district, our empowering statute, where they get rid of old language, or they provide, I would say, more direct, understandable language within our state statutes. There were two provisions within the bill that I noticed. One, for purposes of employee termination, when it gets to that level of the board, current law says that it's to be by a vote of 2/3 of the full board. They struck full board, so now it says 2/3 of the board. So should one of you be absent, the number is 4. Under current law, my reading is that the number is always 5. The other item contained in there is when we moved to subdivisions, this state statute said that the M.U.D. Board of Directors may move to subdivision, allowing you to exercise self-autonomy. Once you moved into political subdivision, it was Bill Drafter and the former legal counsel's contention that there is no lawful mechanism to move back from subdivisions to at large. Yes.
Question. On the first point where it requires the vote of the attending members, the present members, would that include members that participated via the WebEx?
the way I would answer that question is I know there's a certain amount of meetings that you're allowed to have via WebEx where you're allowed to vote.
Right.
And so that provision in law that allows you to do that, it's the same as being present. So as long as it's within those numbers, you're a present voting board member.
So do you think that needs clarification in terms of, having been in Lincoln, we know what the fine points can do to you. Do you think that needs to be inserted to include that provision?
I don't because the specific provision that relates to your ability to vote via WebEx, it's the same as you being present at the meeting. So that change in state statute that allows you to attend the board meeting in a virtual fashion and vote, it's analogous to you being present at the board meeting.
So we'll run with that.
Yeah.
And Rick, just to clarify, so we have a quorum with 5 directors for a meeting, correct?
Yes.
But for a termination hearing, we can have no less than 6. So we'd have to have at least 6 board members for a termination hearing, even though a quorum is 5 directors.
Director Begley, I think it would be 5. We would have to have 5.
5 for a termination hearing?
Because the way the current statute sits, you need 5 board members in the affirmative to terminate. Rick?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Does that make
So,
sense?
yes, okay.
Okay.
Thanks for clarification.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think this negates the fact that you need a quorum to conduct business, right? So.
But if we had 6, there would be 4 for termination. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And I guess if you had 5, you'd need 3?
Does that need to be spelled out in the language?
I've talked to Senator McKinney, who chairs the Urban Affairs Committee, and I've talked to legal counsel, and I'll revisit the issue whether they're willing to go back and leave that language alone.
Well, I know you have a hell of a lot of time. There's nothing going on in Lincoln, so.
We'll see what we can we'll see what we can get done, and in March I'll report back where that item's at.
Appreciate it.
And then on behalf of the board and management, do you have any clarification of this ability to conduct 6 meetings virtually? That came about as a result of the pandemic. Do we know if that's just going to stay in place in perpetuity until something changes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I know that was a bill that the League of Municipalities worked on for quite a while. And if I'm inaccurate on any of my relaying on the ability to attend meetings by Zoom, then I'm going to notify the board via email. Sometimes past legislation and current legislation get merged together in my mind. So I'm going off my best recollection of what happened when that bill passed. I think, was it a year or 2 ago?
Probably 2. Yeah.
Moving on, LB 205 from Senator Von Gilleren is a bill that essentially says government entities' proposals or bid specifications for public contracts cannot contain information, requesting, hey, do you or do you not have a collective bargaining agreement, inquiring as to what your status is as a party or non-party, asking about a bidder's hiring requirements or local headquarters. This bill is scheduled to go to Government, Military, and Veterans Affairs. And the initial handicapping is, given the makeup of that committee, this bill looks like it's likely to come out onto the floor. I did speak to the lobbyist that is bringing this bill, and I requested that the district be removed, that utilities be removed from this legislation. And I was told as of yesterday that he indicated that that's likely, that that's going to be done, that there'll be an exemption for gas, water, and electric utilities, basically making LB 205 non-applicable to district purposes. Again, that was a verbal understanding, and I need to monitor this bill closely and make sure that that language does in fact get inserted, and we'll certainly update the board in relation to LB 205 if that understanding changes. LB, I'm going to skip 237. LB 267 was heard yesterday. It was introduced by Senator Brewer, and it essentially allows the prioritization of resources for critical infrastructure utility workers, which includes district employees, when a civil defense emergency is ordered, and basically make sure that critical employees have access to personal protective equipment, vaccines, medical screenings, et cetera. The way this bill would operate is that the district would have to provide the state of Nebraska a list of those employees that we deem to be critical in an emergency. In my mind, I think of that as the person running the controls at our water operations, our LNG facilities, and should the governor declare an emergency, we're placed in line with, and what was stated yesterday, likely behind line of first responders and medical personnel, but we're in front of the line from what I would describe as the general public.
And Rick, quick question. Did we make a statement at that hearing?
We did not. We submitted a letter of support. Seth Voiles, on behalf of OPPD, spoke on behalf of the utilities in general. There was a lot of support for the bill. I know General Bohawk with the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency had some issues, and he was the only one that spoke against the bill.
Okay, and then is it just case by case, or when we're proponent, or when we're for, or when we're against, do we usually speak down there, or do we send letters, or how do we usually operate?
I would say more often than not, we are submitting our opposition, our support via letter to the committee, and then it's bill by bill specific. There's some bills where certainly we get up, and especially those that have an immediate direct impact to the district, or if we're the entity that's actually asking the legislation to be brought forward, then we're certainly speaking. A lot of times it's talking like this one, LB 267 was really brought forward by OPPD, and they know that if they wanted an additional proponent testimony, they know that they've got the ability to ask us, and we would be more than happy to show up and do that for them.
Thank you.
I am going to skip ahead a couple to LB 389.
Before you do that,
yep.
Other than the lead service issue, why would we want to get involved in what's going to be a fight, I think, with LB 270?
That's a very good question, Director Friend. To the degree we support LB 270, it's going to be support specifically related to whatever we can do to encourage the removal of lead service lines. That bill is initially drafted. I think I've got some questions about it because it says landlords need to remove lead services, but my reading of the bill, I don't know what the triggering mechanism of that is. Is it all landlords need to remove lead service lines? Is it a case where it's only when the cities go in and condemn a property that's going to trigger the removal of lead service lines? And so it's a bill that we're going to watch closely, but to the degree we're going to support it, it would be just supporting regulations that do things to get rid of lead service lines in general, but not necessarily the other provisions of the bill not directed towards us.
I guess I don't know how you cut the baby in half, because if you support it, you support it. If you don't, you don't. I guess you could go in and say we support to that extent, but I think this is going to be a fight because I understand the meaning of it, but it's, if a property's condemned, then the rental property, and I'm not sure whoever else, has to provide a plan, the owner, for housing, food, transportation, moving expenses, legal services. I mean, why would we want to get, that's going to be a fight. Who's going to pay for that? And why would we want to get involved in any of it?
And that's a great point. That's the main target of the bill. I mean, that's the main purpose of the bill being introduced, is to address these situations where the city goes in and condemns a property. And it would be Senator McKinney's position that there needs to be better plans in place on what's going to happen with those tenants. And then I would say our provision related to lead services is a side issue. So to the degree that we would support the bill, this would probably be one of those, as Director Sidzik pointed out, would be a letter from the district saying, hey, we're not really getting involved in the other provisions of the bill, but of interest to the district is this lead service line provision.
This looks like the result of the Christmas Eve issue at 108th and Fort.
Yes.
And then they tacked it on the lead service to make it more popular for people like us to support.
We talked about this a little bit. I would concur. And certainly that would have enormous ramifications. Every condemned property and the timing and, if people aren't living in it, do you need to do that right now? So I know that you're monitoring to ensure that it's clear, and we would probably be ecstatic if there weren't any references in this statute to lead services and just keep it over in the other parts where we are encouraging the replacement of that, because it's, what is it, $6,000 to $8,000 for people to have to do that.
That's
if you're a
correct.
homeowner.
If for your general homeowner, I would say 6 on the low side, 10 on the high side,
okay.
and probably, but yeah, 6 to 8 right in there, and then that number, and I shouldn't speak to what the average cost is for landlords, but I would think that those might sometimes be more extensive and more expensive.
All right.
Would we be better off making our position on this neutral until we see what the bill looks like after it comes out of committee?
There would be no heartburn in doing that and watching it and getting an understanding of what the triggering mechanism is for having the landlords remove the lead service lines. So
kind of neutral, supportive of.
And we can always
human
change
beings.
it later on too if it gets better defined. So neutral might be the way to go right now.
When you make the motion, if the rest of the board supports, then at that point it would be all, assuming nothing else changes, to change that to neutral then.
I'll hold out 1 or 2 of these.
Okay.
the next one I wanted to briefly discuss, and Director Friend, thanks for bringing me back to that, because it's hard to determine, which of these I should go over, and I'm going over almost all of them, but not all of them, but happy to talk about each and every one. LB 389 from Senator Linehan was heard yesterday, and I like bills that have a simple reading, and this one does have a simple reading. This basically says, cities, if you are going to use tax increment financing, you've got to wait 50 years again to use tax increment financing. That's basically the simple version of the bill. Senator Linehan testified, and then various folks from the city of Omaha. I should say one folk from the city of Omaha and one from Omaha by Design got up and spoke in opposition to that bill. The next one is LB 394 by Senator Erdman.
Rick, I'm sorry, could we go back to 389?
Yes.
Is the proposed streetcar line, is that part of a TIF plan?
It is.
And TIF is for economic development, is it?
That's
It's
a
not
very
for infrastructure replacement, is it?
that would be that is my understanding is tax increment finances
For development.
It's for economic development.
Thank you.
Others might phrase it differently.
Mark Doyle, President. Part of the testimony, one of the questions that the chair of the Urban Affairs Committee asked every speaker was, do you believe that TIF is being used as the legislation for TIF implied it to be used? And without fail, the opponents of Senator Linehan's bill said yes, and the proponents said no. So it's an interesting discussion, and it's aimed at an area that's already used TIF in the past as part of this. I would also say that, is it called the League of Cities?
The Nebraska League of Municipalities.
Okay, they testified as an opponent to the bill, saying that it might seem obvious that using TIF within 50 years you shouldn't do, but out in some small towns you might reuse it more often than that. And then the question was, okay, what if we only limited it to Omaha? And we still oppose it. So it was an interesting hearing based on another bill that Rick will speak of real soon here.
And to your point, Mark, and it was Christy Abraham who spoke on behalf of the League of Municipalities, that in smaller communities, they might TIF a 2-block area, and then within 30 years, there might be a small piece of that 2-block area that now they want a different project. So that the cities themselves want the ability to, even if it's just a portion, re-TIF within a 50-year time frame. But a bill that's will be certainly interesting to watch as it moves through the process. The next bill on your list is LB 394, and this paragraph's probably much more verbose than it needs to be. To simplify it, when property is condemned for public use, usually the damages paid are fair market value plus reasonable severance and abstracting expenses. This essentially says, hey, if you're going to condemn ag property just for purposes of ag land exclusively, the damages will be 2 times the fair market value of agricultural land. From the district's perspective, I think it's fair, property's property, and the fair market value, whether you're in the city, outside the city, ag land, I think it's safe to say the district's position should be we should be paying fair market value. So our opposition to that bill would be specifically related to that provision. Moving on, and I know this first report's always a little bit lengthy. I wanted to discuss LB 613 by Senator McDonald. This is a bill that asks for $45 million of general fund to be provided to the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy, specifically for the purposes of removing lead service lines for M.U.D. customers. Of that $45 million, up to 10%, or in this case, $4.5 million, may be used for a workforce training program. And that would essentially be the training of the types of workers you would need for purposes of removing lead service lines. LB 636 is a repeat bill from last year that the district supported. This type of legislation says, hey, we're going to prohibit municipalities from limiting fuel choices. And it's essentially that simple. This is happening in specific parts of the country where new developments, they might say, we're going to do a new subdivision. We want it to be run on all electricity, no carbon-based fuels. this bill would prohibit cities, towns, and villages from enacting those types of rules or regulations. The next two I'm going to talk to in a collective sense. Those are bills being introduced by Senator Linehan on behalf of the district, LB 691 and 693, and they essentially do the same thing, but in slightly different ways. LB 691 would amend current Nebraska state law as it relates to how city streets are regulated, specifically clarifying, I would say, that state law, that if a city were to put forward a fixed rail or streetcar system, that the project owner should pay all necessary utility relocations specifically for gas and water. 693 from Senator Linehan does the same thing, but it does it through the tax increment financing mechanism, essentially saying if you use tax increment financing for fixed rail or streetcar system, you need to pay for gas and water utility relocations. That bill, both of those bills have been referred to Urban Affairs Committee, and they are likely to be heard on the same day. And then really, unless you have any questions on any of the other bills, and I'm happy to speak to them, that's kind of a good overview of the legislative items.
Rick, I had
Yes, I just want to make one point quickly, an overview comment that Mark Doyle, President, of the three bills that Senator Linehan's introduced, the 50-year bill we had nothing to do with. We're not really debating TIF or not TIF or favorable or opposition to the project. That's got nothing to do with our position here. It's strictly the policies on how water is developed, and it's developer driven. We definitely have something to do with these two. And there's been talk that we had to do with the other. We didn't. Just for the record, we are involved in the other two, which is simply a clarification of our policies and hopefully drives more discussion. You saw earlier, and that's why I pointed it out, typically developer-driven projects that are economic development, not typically, always, it's crystal clear. We don't pay for those. And we are willing to reprioritize X amount. I'm trying not to use dollar amounts because we haven't had enough design to really be accurate yet, but we've identified infrastructure that we can, with a clear conscience, bring to this board and say, these should be reprioritized and brought into this project, and I think that's a great position to be in. It is the consequence of failure. We use two things: risk of failure, consequence of failure. All things being equal on risk of failure, consequence of failure ramps up. Whether you're in front of a school, you're in front of a hospital, whether there's a whole bunch of lead service lines connected, all things equal. And in this case, underneath the rails of a streetcar would raise the consequence of failure here. We are reasonable. I think last we spoke, Director Cook, you said we are reasonable, and all we're advocating is follow our policies, and we don't even need this discussion. So I'm going to be a little careful when the hearing hits, but I'm going to be pretty direct about it also. Director.
And Mark, a question for you and maybe a question for Mr. Mendenhall. During Mr. Mendenhall's two appearances before the City Council in November, the city stated adamantly that they would continue discussions and negotiations with M.U.D. In good faith. Could you provide us with an update on, have there been any subsequent meetings with the city? What have been the communications with the city since your two appearances before the council?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Director Bigley. Mark Mendenhall, General Counsel. There really have not been much interaction with the city after the December, I believe it was December 12th City Council meeting, where city leaders, city staff indicated their high degree of confidence that they'd be able to work out an agreement with the district. And I'm sorry, even let's go the day before, as we were discussing how to define these quote-unquote buckets of, which is essentially allocation of costs. I was under the assumption, I guess I was led to believe during that discussion that we would be given something like that evening or the next day. 2.5 weeks go by, I send a letter to the city asking for an update. Another 2 weeks go by and I received a response. And so that's probably the last communication from the city, was that communication now indicating that their preference is, I'm paraphrasing, but their preference is that we need to wait in order to allocate costs until costs are defined. And as costs won't be defined until we're at like 90%. And so what we're doing is we're operating on an opinion of probable cost that our engineering folks have put together after a lot of due diligence. They are currently working on a 15% design. As I've talked to Mr. Nia, what that means is a block by block by block review of the entire streetcar project area with respect to our systems. So that's going to take a significant amount of time. And so long answer to question, we really haven't had much, and we've provided everything that they've asked for. I guess I want to emphasize that. So,
thank you.
Rick, I had another question on LB 734. Could you go into a little more detail on what the intent is there with that one?
Yes, Director Sidzik, that bill is, I would say, being proposed because of, I would say, current events that we're hearing about, where I think it was on the East Coast where a power station was shot up and they lost electricity to a community for a while. It's been referred to the Judiciary Committee and creates essentially a new crime, or a Class 2 felony, and it's specific if an actor intentionally causes substantial interruption or impairment of a public communication, transportation, for our purposes, supply of water, gas, our power, our other public service, and then there's an and in there, and it results in an impairment or interruption causing, and the and is causing or being a contributing factor in death or serious injury. In all likelihood, that type of behavior as it currently exists today, you're probably going into the federal courthouse for, I would say, numerous criminal federal laws that would address that. But this would create a new state statute, Class 2 felony, should an actor engage in that kind of behavior.
And how does this bill affect or protect M.U.D. employees?
You know, I would say the only thing in terms of protection is it puts the public on notice, hey, if you engage in this kind of nonsense, you know, there's going to be additional crimes that can be filed against you.
But nothing if an employee of M.U.D. made a mistake on a job, hit a line? No repercussions for that? No, that's not what it's intended for. It's basically, you know, those engaged in terroristic behavior that want to disrupt the gas, water, electric grid. But not, and you know, the only way it would be intended for an employee is if they intentionally engaged in that kind of behavior to shut down the gas or water supply. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next month will be much more brief.
Well, all right. Insurance and pension. Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer Joseph Shafford will introduce the 2022 retirement plan and other post-employment benefits, followed by Joseph Wolfram with Vanguard Institutional Advisory Services in person.
How about that? So good morning. My name is Joe Schaffert. I serve as the district's chief financial officer, and behind tab A, you will find my transmittal memo as well as the year-end report from Vanguard that lists results for both the pension and OPEB trusts. I think we would all concur that 2022 is a year that we would like to put behind us from an investment return perspective, both personally as well as our trust funds. The thing that's interesting when Joe presented to the Insurance and Pension Committee is, despite the black cloud that hangs over 2022 full year, fourth quarter was actually positive, of 7.02 for the pension and 7.61 for the OPEB trust, which is remarkable when you consider that the full year was negative by 17.05 for the pension and 17.45% for the OPEB. So I guess it could have been much worse were it not for that improvement in the fourth quarter. So our investment policy statement requires that on an annual basis, the investment advisor presents to the full board, and that's why Mr. Wolfram is joining us this morning. He's a senior investment consultant with Vanguard. He did present a more detailed version of what you're about to hear to the Insurance and Pension Committee on January 23rd. So with that, I will yield the podium to Mr. Wolfram. Good to see you in person, Joe.
Very good to see you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So first of all, thanks for having me. Joe Wolfram, Senior Investment Consultant, Vanguard Institutional Advisory Services from the Vanguard Group. So first, I just want to thank the board of directors for their commitment and trust in Vanguard, and actually for allowing us to serve as co-fiduciaries among the pension and OPEB plans. So it's a relationship we truly value. Secondly, it's great to be here in person. I wish I did have better news to share with you regarding 2022, but things happen. So first of all, I'd like to direct your attention to slide 2. Slide 2, it just basically shows what an outlier year 2022 actually was. So if we look north and south, we show bond returns going back to 1926. And if we go right to left, we show stock returns going back to 1926. And you can see highlighted in the maroon text, 2022 returns. When you think about it, equity returns last year were negative 14.49%, fixed income returns negative 13.07%. It truly was an outlier year. So looking at some of the other gold dots, you could see 1931, again, very negative year for equities, not so much for bonds, beginning of the Depression. 1974, OPEC embargo, again, negative for both equities and fixed income. But again, none of those years really were as much outliers as we saw last year. So despite last year at this time, when I was saying the outlook for equities is very negative, despite fixed income yields being at all-time lows, and obviously when income goes up, returns for fixed income are negative, it's really hard to time the markets. So first of all, I'd like to commend the Insurance and Pension Committee for standing by as well on understanding that we have a long-term strategy. We don't try to time the markets. Markets timing is very much like reacting to weather. So in the winter, I know it's going to snow. I can't tell you the specific days it's going to snow, and I can't tell you how much it's going to snow. And that we've seen that. So the understanding that for the prior years before that, going back to 2021, 2020, 2019, all very strong positive returns. So returns for the portfolio in 2019 were over 20%. Returns in 2020 and 2021 were between 13 and 14%. We didn't expect that to keep going. We certainly didn't expect the strong negative returns in both bonds and equities, but we do plan for that. And again, have a long-term perspective when we look at those things. So I want to move forward to slide 3 just to talk about the specific returns. Returns, the asset allocation, and some fees. So looking at slide 3, you can see that the first quarter, all negative, not very significantly negative in review of all things, particularly compared to the second and third quarters, but negative nonetheless. There is a phrase or saying, et cetera, in financial areas known as the January effect or the January barometer. Sometimes that says how January goes is how the year goes. I don't put much emphasis on that. This time last year, The highest day for the portfolio was January 3rd, so the very first day of the year. From that point forward, equity returns were negative, never came back, and from that point forward, fixed income returns were negative. So literally, January 1st was the highest point of the year. There was almost a 10% correction in the equity markets in January, and we did see a down year. If that's any indication for this year, it's actually good positive news. So equity markets for the year, so far this month, S&P returned up almost 6%. NASDAQ has returned about 11%. That's its highest return since January of 2001. And we have seen the portfolios rebound significantly. Taking it a step back, when we go back to the lows, October 12th was S&P 500 relative low. The returns have been even stronger. So the returns from that point in time, going back on a year-to-date through Friday, portfolio returns are about 5.3%, 5.4% for the pension plan, slightly higher for the OPEB plan. But even going further back, since October 1st, the portfolios are up almost 13% and over 13% for the OPEB plan. So again, we think long-term and directionally, it's not, the timing is the hard part. You know, everybody can understand when markets are overvalued, fairly valued, et cetera, but deciding when to move in and more importantly, when to move out and then move back in are very, very hard things to do. On a year-to-date basis, again, you can see every single asset class was negative. So domestic equities were negative, international equities were negative, domestic fixed income was actually the best performing asset class, and that was negative 12.64% on a year-to-date basis. International fixed income, negative 12.89%, and real estate fund, actually the worst performer of the year at negative 26.17%. I will say that since the beginning of the year, not surprisingly, somewhat of a reversion to the mean. We've seen real estate return about 9.5% in the month of January. Domestic fixed income and international fixed income are the lowest returners so far in 2023, about 3% each. And domestic equities are about 6.6%. International equities are about 9%. So again, both portfolios so far this year are up about 5.3%. Looking back since inception, the pension plan, which inception is February 2009 for the pension plan, annual returns have been about 7.73%. And for the OPEB plan, since inception, returns have been about 6.53%. Particularly for the pension plan, that does exceed the expected return on asset assumption, which is that long-term return assumption. So that, from a long-term perspective, again, is a good thing. On the bottom left-hand side of this slide, we show the pension and OPEB policy allocations. The pension allocation is 60% equities, 32% fixed income, 8% real estate investment trusts, or REITs. And the OPEB policy is slightly more aggressive. That's 67% equities, 25% fixed, and 8% fixed income. At this point in time, we don't have any recommendations for changes to those strategic allocations. For the next quarter meeting with the Insurance and Pension Committee, I will be providing an asset allocation study, and we'll be looking at forecasted returns for the next 10 years using Vanguard's December 2022 capital market assumptions, which should be available in a few weeks. Finally, we just want to touch on fees for the plans. There are two types of fees involved in this. The first is the investment fees and expenses. That is the expense ratio using each of the funds. So to manage actual assets, portfolio managers have to buy and sell stocks. There's costs to doing that. Those costs are not out-of-pocket costs, so the returns that we show are net of that expense ratio. And for the portfolio level, they're actually net of advisory fees as well. So for example, when you look at the one-year returns for domestic equity being negative 19.51%, that already has that investment expense taken out of it. Investment expenses are prorated, so there's an investment expense for each of the funds themselves, and the prorated allocation of the assets in that fund to the total portfolio nets out to be about 5 basis points which is 5 cents per $100. In dollar terms for both portfolios, the expense ratio for 2022 was approximately $283,000. And again, that comes out of returns. The other expense that we show is the advisory fees. So that's the direct cost that is paid from the accounts directly. Advisory fees are 3 basis points or 3 cents per $100. And on an annualized basis for both plans, that was $173,000. Any questions about anything discussed so far? No? Okay. Slide 4 and 5, I'm not going to spend a lot.
I want to talk to the board for a second, take a little liberty here.
Sure.
As the board knows, we provide this in writing, and I want to make sure I manage this discussion because we have such an active committee, and we have quarterly meetings. What we just discussed was the overview and why this was a exceptionally unpredictable year. And when you talk to us about the weather, we get it around here. I don't know where you're from, but yeah. We get that. But, the policy, which we all, including our employees, through management and the bargaining unit leadership, we agree on our philosophy and our policies. And we're very transparent here. You are the public. Joe just went over the fees we pay very clearly and transparently and why this is a great service and worth it. And our pension plan is funded at 94, 92?
Yeah.
Depends. And we could manipulate that and change our interest assumptions and all that, but we don't do it willy-nilly. And the committee knows this. So I want to make sure we speed through this because the committee goes through this in great detail. And it's I think it's important to be here in person once in a while, as you do and we all do. So if there are any Q&A, I don't know how much you have left, but I want to cut to the chase here so the board can ask any questions they'd like. But it's really important to stress that the process in place with our committee structure quarterly, agreeing and disagreeing on our discussions on policy, investment philosophies and agreeing on fees and those sort of things. So I don't know if the committee has anything to add, but I do want to make sure we don't cut short Q&A before we get a little weary here. We have a long morning.
Just a clarification, I thought I heard it, $173,000 are the fees for both, to manage both of them together. It's not each. It's not 173 each for.
No, correct.
Okay.
So that's an annualized number to manage the total portfolio.
3 cents per $100.
So 3 basis points
right.
is the expense ratio. The fees themselves are based for advisory fees. It's a tiered structure. Mm-hmm. It's a standard tiered structure. So the more assets you have, the lower your costs. It's bottom weighted from that. And using the dollar amount in total, it's to my point, $173,000 for the advisory fees.
So I would say big picture stuff we don't need to go through.
So I don't want to cover any of that so much. Available to answer any questions regarding performance. The next few slides just talk about.
I have one follow-up to what Mark was saying. Go ahead. I did have a question because of all the returns that we saw in 2022 and everything. I know Pat Beckham's going to do her actuarial study and everything, but you mentioned we're funded at 92, 94. Last year, under Pat's study, we were at 97%. Have we had a preliminary estimate of what it is?
Hi, Joe Schaffert, CFO. That is underway, Mike. We don't have it yet. In fact, that's the last things we get to close the books for the year, so to speak, are the actual evaluation report. Given the fact that the actuarial approach spreads the impact of things like this over 10 years, it will drop the funding percentage. It was mid-90s, maybe 95, 96. The accounting version of that was nearly 100. And the accounting version spreads it over 5 years. So that'll be more impacted by what occurred this year than the actuarial, but we don't yet have that. We will within the next couple of weeks, I believe.
I figure, I know Pat's typically comes in and talks about it.
Not till April.
And last year, 2021, we had a great year. Remember the returns and everything? She also said those returns are not put right in. They're spread over the
Good
time.
and bad is over 10 years.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So just one final point I'd like to fast forward unless there are any other questions. And this is really the takeaway, is if we move to slide 19, which is in the appendix. And this stresses Mr. Doyle's point. So slide 19, we call this the wealth creation chart. So if you look, and this doesn't even go back to inception, this only goes back to January 1st, 2015. So over 7 years, we look at that gray area, that's the initial investment, and that red area is the area for returns themselves, so how much of the portfolio is made up of returns. So looking at that amount, in January 1st, 2015, we had $208 million in the portfolio. At the end of last year, that value is $469 million almost. So when you add those returns together, that's $174 million of returns over a 7-year period. Moving that forward, actually, to the end of January, we picked up an additional $25 million. So almost $200 million out of that amount is return generated. So that goes to what some have quoted Albert Einstein is saying, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. So we see that by those returns. And again, that's why we do maintain that long-term strategy. The prior slide, slide 18, just summarizes returns on an annualized basis, and we could see strong positive returns over a period of years, and we're going to see those negative returns periodically. Okay. Unless there's any questions, again, in this presentation, the summary of our market and economic outlook. We speak about that periodically, and a lot of other information highlighting 2022. So if there's any follow-up questions, feel free to let me know. Okay. Thank you.
Nice
Again,
to
great
see you.
seeing everyone. Hopefully,
Has it been since 2020 that we haven't
3 years.
seen?
Yeah, it's been. I know the COVID hiatus. Yes. Yeah, believe it or not. So I hope everyone has a healthy, happy, and prosperous 2023.
Help me remember, Joe, where are you located physically? Where's your office?
Our office is in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, or Malvern, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Philadelphia.
You get to come back to this good weather for me.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that regarding the weather. You know, we had 3 inches of rain last week. Thankfully, the temperature was in the low 40s. Otherwise, it would have been 30 inches of snow. So, although I heard it did snow last night. So.
Excited about football.
I didn't want to bring that up, but since you asked, go Birds.
I just want to say, as a member of the committee, I really have appreciated when we've done our conference calls and things, how willing you are to explain things. I know there's a lot of terminology that the average person isn't familiar with, and so it's so helpful when you are patient and tell us what this will mean or something else. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Director Howard. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Then we have Senior Vice President and General Counsel Mark Mendenhall will review the proposed draft of the Rules of Order and Procedure.
Yeah, again, good morning, Mark Mendenhall, Senior Vice President, General Counsel. Behind tab B, you will find a draft Rules of Order and Procedure. Credit and compliments should be directed to Ms. Mancuso, and certainly comments and criticism send my way. So what you'll find is not a recommendation to take action today. It's really more for your review, your discussion. My thought was let the governance committee, let the full board digest what is proposed and tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like, and we can bring something back in March. We could bring it back later even. This board has operated informally under the kind of the Roberts Rules of Order, and the effort here was to take how this board has historically acted, whether it is taking action, whether it is engaging in discussion, whether it is having questions related to order. And so while we haven't followed those Roberts rules to a T, that's kind of been our guidepost here. So what Ms. Mancuso, Mr. Kubat, and I have tried to do is take how this board operates and put it onto paper. So again, it's It's just for your review, and I'm happy to engage in discussions over the course of anytime you want, over the course of the month, and we can see where we are at the towards the end of February, and if we're ready to have the board consider something more formal, we'll be ready in March, and if you want to do it later, we're ready then. So.
Hey, Mark, in this document here, are the changes in blue then, I take it?
Well, really, there is, I think the blue is just, no. So this is a completely new document. So the blue is just kind of headers, just to maybe draw more attention to that. The black I would call as the actual rule, and then I think we just highlighted comments to better understand certain provisions in red. So that's really.
Is there a document that this used to change? You said this is an original document?
Yes.
Have we documented these before?
No.
Okay.
So, Mike, to your question, and Mark, thank you, and Mary Mancuso is just absolutely fantastic in everything she does. Incidentally, she's a fantastic artist, and I took my family down to her display at the Lauritsen Gardens over the holidays. So, but
I did too.
A little background on this. Mary and I met, gosh, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago to start talking about putting something on paper to have our own rules of order, which, as Mark said, is modeled on the Roberts Rules of Order. But we've never had, well, we have our bylaws, which is separate from our rules of order or any rules of order. But we talked about, had a number of meetings, and Mary stuck with it, and her persistence has paid off. And I read through the first draft. Thank you, Mary, for all your efforts, and Mark and Rick as well.
And we've never really had a board orientation book either, so that's been new. Another initiative that we worked on, and I think we first tried it out on Director Howard, but I could be wrong about that. We haven't had a lot of change over the years, so we appreciate your support. It's not written in stone, and it is a derivative of the way we operate. My first meeting in January of 1990, I attended my first meeting in January of, teasing Dave a little bit, 1993. I really shouldn't say. Anyway, I had Robert's Rules of Order with me, and I said, is this how we operate? And I was told, no, we don't. It's a guideline. So over the years, I kind of tried to, we've had incidents where we start stumbling over a substitute motion, which is fine, but it is nice to have it codified in print and the board agreeing on it and adopting it. A governance committee didn't exist until modern days. So thanks for your support on this, and this is just meant to be, what do you think?
And Mark, one thing I do want to add, which was kind of the impetus for me reaching out to Mary those few years ago. We see on our agenda for the committee meetings and the regular monthly meeting, the last item on the agenda is public comment. And I always thought these are open meetings, these are transparent meetings. We should put more emphasis on allowing the public to comment, or at least notify us to say, I'd like to comment on agenda item number 6. So instead of pushing the public to the end of the line, having them have a more prominent voice, a more timely voice as those items are brought up on the agenda. So just something for the board to consider as they review this document.
There might be a reason to do it at the beginning and end, because after we deliberate that, I agree, these are board items, so we want to make sure the door's open on all of those things. And it's really nice to do this just to do it, to have better governance, not as a result of conflict. And I want to compliment you on that. That's very critical to the way we run the district, that this board is collaborative and operates at such a high level.
And it'll help Mr. Mendenhall or whoever the general counsel is many years down the road. We always put Mark on the spot that, Mark, what's your ruling on this? Is it proper that we're doing it this way? So it would provide guidance to the general counsel, to the board as well.
Hey, to follow up on Jim's comment on the public comment, when somebody goes through a presentation like capital expenditures, Gina's up there, she says, any questions? Can the public ask a question at that time if they're in attendance?
I would say how we operate today is that public comment is reserved for, like Mr. Director Bagley, said, towards the end of the committee meeting and at the regular meeting. And so,
but why wouldn't we let it, when like Gina goes through, any of them go through and their presentation, which are usually all very good, any questions? And she's looking at the board, and we have questions. But if the public's here and has a question, couldn't they, at that time, instead of wait till the end?
I think, in my mind, that's, you all can tell me what you like to do.
But
I think
we-
that there's two approaches. I think one is the board via something like this document could say, hey, we want to codify and make sure that after every agenda item, the public has an opportunity to comment. Or another approach could be, and this is just off the top of my head, the board chair, as we've written it today, the board chair can set reasonable guidelines. The board chair could say, under my direction for this year, this is how we're going to operate. I'm going to have an agenda item and then a public comment. So those are two ideas, and we could
Yeah,
work through
we've got
both.
some time to think about it.
And we'd be happy to convene a committee meeting with the governance committee before we finalize this, once or twice or as many times as you'd like. Thanks for the support and
Thank you.
for pushing it. And Mary, your work on this, really, very much appreciated.
I think it's important to have some procedure for how we go forward so that people don't, I agree with the public, certainly the public having comment and opportunity for comment, but I don't know that we want to have it interrupting the general flow of the information. Like I say, I always refer to this coming from 8 years in Lincoln, there is a procedure and it works. And I would be the last person to discourage anybody from having an opinion or being willing to speak up, but there is a time, and I think we need to respect that. And along those same lines, I'd like to say how much I appreciate how well this board works together. I've just been so impressed by how everyone respects everyone. I've never felt that there is a political divide between us. I think everyone is certainly willing to listen to the other person, and I, for one, am really grateful for that. So thank you. Thank you, every one of you.
Another quick question. Sure. Our meetings are on WebEx. I mean, people can log in and watch the meeting live, right?
Yes.
Can they, at the time of public comment, whenever it is, can they chime in? Is it available to the people on WebEx to say, I have a question from their house or wherever they're at?
They do not have that opportunity today. My understanding is the broadcast, and I might have to phone a friend with Sue, is that it is posted to our website via YouTube after the conclusion of the meeting. Is that right? That's correct. Yep. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sue Lopsiger, Senior Vice President, Chief Information Officer. We use WebEx internally for any other presenters or people that might in the district be available to take your questions, or for you if you can't be in person. But the live stream is just that. It's a broadcast live stream, and then it's recorded and posted. So the way we operate today does not afford the opportunity for public to be engaged virtually.
So our meetings are not broadcast live as we sit here and talk. They are, after the fact, posted out there.
It is a live broadcast, so people can be watching the broadcast right now as we're speaking. They don't have an opportunity to interact with us. They're simply receiving the broadcast.
Have we gotten any feedback or any concern from people that about that issue?
Not that I am aware of.
Okay.
And the other thing is, you know, we have a great venue here. I haven't seen many people from the public come and attend our meetings. I mean, pardon?
We have a guest today, Ms. Cheryl Weston, a longtime environmental justice and community advocate. Hi, Cheryl.
Okay, that's great. I just want to make sure, we talk about public comment and everything, and the WebEx is a great tool and all that, but I guess you'd have to be very careful, like Gwen says, we got to respect people getting the projects discussed and getting our everything done at the board meeting we need. So maybe the current process is good. I need to think about that, but I just want to clarify and understand exactly how it works.
What we have seen is now that we are broadcasting live, even though it isn't interactive, we do have more people watching our meetings than would bother to come here and show up and sit through it. And maybe it's not many, but if they're interested, it's at least being accessible. And whether we have the public attend or not, the point is you want to be able to have the public attend when they choose to, not whether they do or don't.
And if they watch it live, they can't interact then, but I assume if they had a big issue or something, they would follow up and send a letter or something to you or something, the committee here or whatever.
Yeah,
You're
I
very
agree.
available, yeah.
Public comment, speaking of which.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public in attendance today who would like to address the board? Ms. Weston?
Thank you.
Ms. Cook, is it the process to say your name and so forth?
Yeah,
Or
let's
can
make
we-
sure it's in the record, spelled correctly. You are your grandma.
I am me all the time. I'm the same today, yesterday, anytime. All right. Okay. Thank you. My name is Cheryl Weston, public community activist, environmental, and just all around for my community, which I've been in North Omaha all my life, almost all my life. And I'm not going to tell you how long that is, so don't even ask. But,
Longer than anybody probably thinks by looking at how beautiful she is.
Thank you for this opportunity, and this is my first time being at the public meeting or at your board meeting, and I came underneath a new public outlet called Documenters.org. Documenters.org. And you can go online and see about it, and it's existing in, I think, 9 cities now, where we come in and we go to board meetings so that we can make notes and so forth of the public hearing and try to get more activity from the public, and not always at a time that is a negative issue, but to be more involved and to give feedback too. And I'm a person who believes in giving when it's good or when it's bad. I would like to say I wholeheartedly agree, committee member, director, I'm not sure what to call you, Mr. Bagley. Jim? Okay. Yes, there should be more public comment period before and after. And then I couldn't see from the back, so I don't know if it was Mr. Friend or who, but there needs to be the ideal of having some kind of comment for the agenda items. I disagree with you, Miss, that, having more comment will take up more time. But is time the issue? Aren't you trying to get more involvement from your customers, from the public? You're trying to be more transparent. And I will commend you on your handling as president. I have not seen a board member in the board member meetings I've been attending. You are very involved, but you're very constructive, and also you encourage what's being said and so done. And I will give you high five for how you have handled the board meeting. But I don't have anything really negative to say when I give my report to our director, other than I would hope that you do get more public comment. And it's important, and it can change how people and what people think about M.U.D. Instead of, yes, you're gouging our pockets, particularly during this last couple of months, my bill. But, you guys can make a difference on what the public thinks of M.U.D., no matter what you're doing and how well you do it. So I hope that you will look at putting more public comment into your meetings. And I'm going to get after my director, because she told me it was going to be at 8:30, and it wasn't. And I do not like to be late. So thank you very much again. And I would like to get with you, Mr. Mandela, because I have some questions about that streetcar. I was very impressed with M.U.D. being honest and upfront about how that is going to be paid for, and it's going to be our bills. And I really hope that you guys will continue. And I intend to support Senator Lennon-Hart on her bills that she's put forth, because I think the public wants to know. The majority of the public was against that streetcar, and it should have been a vote from the public, and it wasn't. And I really commend again I didn't get, when you were there, I didn't get a chance to come down to speak to you or something, but I will call you now, is that it needs to get out. M.U.D. was honest of what that cost was going to be, and I hope that you continue to do that. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
If I can ask you, I want to, you pointed out something, thank you for your comments, first of all. And you pointed out something I want to call attention to.
Mark your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. We made a mistake when we designed this building, and we're working on moving that podium as we speak. We do need the public and anyone attending to be able to see the room, so thank you for saying that. And I think I'll be attending a Facebook Live event later in the month.
Okay.
That I think you're involved in, so thank you for that.
Don't leave. Sorry. Say the interaction dialogue. And I hope I didn't misrepresent the information that, or the comments that I made. My discipline, or where I come from, is 8 years in Lincoln, which was very structured. And what we had was a presenter who is not interrupted unless it's by the committee. And then a proponent opinions would come to the stand, and then it would be opponents, and then it would be negative. So what we got as senators in Lincoln was the feedback from people who were in those three categories. And please don't misunderstand. I would be, as I said before, the last person that would discourage any public input in any form. But I do think we owe the presenter the respect to have that opportunity to present. And then the other dialogue comes in after that.
Oh, I agree. And maybe you misunderstood what I said. I agree that it should be the presenter, but then you should have public comment after that, whether they be for or against each item.
Yeah.
Because as we get more mature, we can't always remember those questions or comments that we wanted to make. So to say you wait till the total end of this after 2 hours, you may have forgotten.
Well, you might have
That's
different
what I was
topics
meaning
come up.
after. After each presentation, you should be able to have your public comment.
That's exactly what we did in Lincoln with the proponents, opponents, and because we didn't make people wait until everybody had presented their agenda. Like you say, it could get pretty confusing. Correct. But yeah, I'd say any public input, other than possibly next door, is very helpful to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, boy.
All right. Do any board members have any more comments? Didn't think so. If none, this meeting is now concluded. We will reconvene for the regular monthly board meeting in 10 minutes. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm Tanya Cook. I'm chairperson of the Metropolitan Utilities District Board of Directors, and I'd like to welcome you all to the regular monthly board meeting this morning, February 1st, 2023. This meeting is being live streamed from the boardroom at M.U.D headquarters building located at 7350 World Communications Drive, and a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the M.U.D website after the meeting's conclusion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Here.
Cook?
Here.
Friend?
Here.
Sitzig?
Here.
McGowan?
Here.
Howard?
Here.
Kavanaugh?
Here.
I'd like to advise all those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available on the wall in the back of the boardroom. Pledge of Allegiance. Now, for those who wish to participate, we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of minutes for the committee meetings and regular board meeting for January 4th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sitzig?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Capital expenditures.
Thank you. Capital expenditures, item number 5. Discussed in committee, I move approval as outlined in the memo from Gina Langle dated January 23rd.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sitzig?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Right. Consultant selection for Platte South Capital Improvement Plan.
This is item number 6. It was also discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Chris Thompson dated January 17th.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sitzig?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Number 7, acceptance of contracts and payment of final estimates. Director Friend.
Thank you. Also discussed in committee, this is item number 7. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Stephanie Henn dated January 20th.
I'm going to give him a second.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sitzig?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
8, bids on materials and contracts. Director Friend.
Thank you. Also discussed in committee, I move approval as outlined in the memo from Sherry Meisinger dated January 20th.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sitzig?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Interlocal agreement with Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services. Director Friend.
Thank you. Item number 9 also discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Mark Mendenhall dated January 25th.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sitzig?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Item 10, main extensions. Director Friend.
Thank you. This was also discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Masania dated January 23rd.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sitzig?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
11, wage and/or salary increases and ratifications. Director Begley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that we approve the wage and/or salary increases and ratifications as outlined in Ms. Savine's memo dated January 19th and discussed in committee this morning.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sidzik?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
12, first legislative report, Director Kavanaugh.
This was discussed during committee by our government relations attorney, Rick Kubat, and I'm going to move for approval of the position of each one of these, but I would hold out 2 of them for a separate vote.
All right.
First one will be LB 171, specifically Provision 1. I would hold that out. And then LB 270, which I want to hold that out for separate consideration as well. So I move for approval of the other positions that has been recommended to the board.
Yes.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Kavanaugh, just for clarification, for 171, we're pulling consideration of that bill altogether?
No, just for a separate vote.
I gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sidzik?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes. Now, turning back to LB 171, number 1 under the provision, I would like to move that we change that to oppose. Based on my long-standing tradition, the district should decide whether we have elections and not the legislature. So by changing this from may to shall, takes that away from us. So I'd like a separate vote, and I move that we change the position on that to oppose. And it may die of a second. I've been on 6-1 votes before.
You absolutely have a point. I wouldn't have, yeah, that's kind of more, what word do I want? Prophylactic than, sorry. The real, actual, one of the definitions.
Well, I think one of the concerns, one of the heartburns that I had, and I'd spoken to Rick about this, was we had an agreement. We had agreed to how this would operate, and now the terminology would, by changing that word, would definitely change the intent.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not just house cleaning or cleanup. This changes something. So I'm happy to be the lone wolf in the dark.
No, we can just go on it. What, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, there hasn't been a second yet.
Well,
So there hasn't been discussion.
I'll give it a second.
I think Representative, I'm sorry, Senator, or sorry, Director Gwen gave you a second.
Yes, I did.
All right.
Discussion.
Now you can have discussion.
Any discussion? I thought I saw some fingers moving toward. If not, we'll go ahead and do a roll call.
I have a quick item here. I know what Tim is after, and I respect the fact that he's been stalwart in his position on this. And initially, I agreed with him. I think what's happened in the interim is we would have been, and if we don't change this, then there's still a position, a possibility rather, that we could revert back to at-large elections. And I think if we oppose this, then the legislatures are going to get involved, and they're going to force us to go back to, or force us to stay with district. That's what this is about. If I'm not misunderstanding, it's about district elections.
Yeah, they are forcing us.
Yeah, and I think they've already forced us. They just haven't done it officially. And if Tim's motion to oppose this goes forward, I think it's going to invite some issues on us from the legislature that we might not want.
You still want your second?
I hear you.
And that was actually Rick's contention as well.
Right. And I think after our conversation with Rick yesterday, and my experience in the legislature, that we had some time to clarify all of this. But I hear you on putting your voice down now. So, Director Beckley.
Mr. Kavanaugh has been very adamant and articulate, and he is not wrong, but I am not going to support his amendment. And Tim and I have had numerous conversations about this. He is not wrong, but I think, as Dave just said, I think we're already down the road of having district elections, so I'm gonna oppose it.
Yeah. Well, then let's do a roll call vote.
Bagley?
No.
Cook?
No.
Friend?
No.
Sidzik,
No.
McGowan,
Yes.
Howard,
No.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
All right. Democracy, you have another one?
Okay, now, we turn our attention to LB 270, and we discussed this in committee, and we seem to have some agreement that we would like to change this position to a neutral position. So I would like to make a motion that we change our position from what's been recommended, LB 270, to one of neutrality.
Second.
All right, I was going to second that. Any more discussion on this aspect? Roll call.
Bagley,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Sidzik,
Yes.
McGowan,
Yes. Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
I'll see you one of it too. He's very compliant.
All right, do any board members have any matters of district business to discuss?
Madam Chair, I just have a comment that I want to make to the board and let the public know for sure, too, that looking at the futures market for natural gas, the price of gas has dropped tremendously. And today I look at it, and it's like less than $2.60. And remember, we were talking last November or so for the winter, $8 gas, $7 gas. It's down to $2 and less than $2.60. And I think that's a good news for our public.
Sure.
And will eventually show up in the bills, and hopefully it'll stay that way for the near future.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate your experience in that line of business to learn a lot. Now I'm going to invite Sue Lobsinger to the stage and welcome.
Good morning. Sue Lobsiger, Senior Vice President, Chief Information Officer. I want to take just a few minutes this morning to provide you an update and share with you our intentions specific to our customer service branch downtown. First, let me do some context setting. As many of you recall, prior to the sale of our downtown property, we operated a customer service center for walk-in customers on the first floor of our headquarters building. When the decision was made to sell that property, we sought options on what we could do. It turned out that our partner utility in Omaha Public Power happened to be looking at renovating their lobby and agreed to allow us to share that space and have a joint service center with them. So we worked towards that, and in September of 2019, that opened. Our customers are able to make payments through a drop box, through kiosks, directly with our cashiers, and can also see a customer service clerk about any account inquiries or changes to their account that they needed. As none of us saw coming, 7 months later, we shut that operation down with OPPD due to safety concerns around the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. At that time when we shut down, the only thing our customers could do was make payments through the Dropbox, so that continued. 4 months later, in July of 2020, OPPD reconfigured the space a bit so we could move the kiosks. That allowed our customers to at least come in and be able to make payments in the kiosk. And again, the Dropbox was available, but no face-to-face interaction happened there. In fact, we kept that branch closed for over 2 years, 2 years and 6 months, 30 months. We were shut down with no interaction with our customers down there. In August of last year, August 2022, again, in conjunction with OPPD, we agreed to reopen that. And so our customers are able to come in and do business as we did pre-pandemic. We've been monitoring the activity down there, and I guess as all things pandemic, life has changed, and we don't see customers coming back to the levels that we might have expected. We've seen almost 60% reduction in cashier activity, almost 50% reduction in payments at our kiosks, and nearly 80% reduction in people coming in for account servicing. So this has clearly caught our attention, and it is our intention to slowly phase out of that facility. We have done a little bit of analysis, and in so doing, what we want to do is add other payment locations around the city. So Jay, if you could bring up that one branch payment slide. Steph Mueller and team did some work, and they looked at, for the people that come to the branch to make payments, what's the address associated with those accounts? And you can see there's clearly clusters around downtown, north and south, but there really are people coming from all over the city to make payments down there. One would presume they're working down there and they walk over. And then the next slide, the second slide there, Jay. Today, customers can pay at First National and Hy-Vee locations. We're looking to expand that to Walmart's Family Fare, Supermercado, and Kroger Bakers locations across the city. And we really believe this meets the customers where they are. They're making payments, or their accounts are from all over the city. This would provide payment locations for those that feel the need that they have to do walk-in payments rather than any other way that they can pay online or over the phone or whatnot. So that would be our intent, is to slowly phase out of that facility, add this opportunity for our customers to interact with us. There's some cost savings, but it's really less about cost savings and meeting our customers where they are and leveraging our staff to the best we can for our customers. So we've had a team of 9 associated with the facility down there. Through that time when we were closed, they were reallocated to help on the phones and with our online activity. We'd like to fully leverage them in those other channels where we see our customers. So with that, I will. One other thing I wanted to note, as we've talked about this and looked at what our next steps are, my biggest concern was, as we think about closing that facility, and we would keep the drop box. That would be the idea with OPPD. People could still make drop box payments there. My biggest concern was that the staff hear this kind of news from their management team. So we have notified the staff, and we've notified OPPD. We have done no customer notifications or outreach at all at this point, but this would be the first public discussion about us and our intentions. So wanted to bring that to your attention, and happy to answer any questions.
So the staff that you said, are they going to be relocated within M.U.D? We're not letting them go.
Correct.
Okay. Secondly, is OPPD still have theirs open down there? Do they have a lot of activity?
I can't speak to what their activity has changed or not, Director McGowan. They are currently open. I don't know what their intentions are. I'm sure they're going to be watching what we do. I know also that they're going through a master facility plan. They have some challenges with Energy Plaza, and I know that they have decisions to make, but that's about all I know.
Now, when we went and partnered with the OPPD and they redid their floor plan, did we sign a contract? Do we have to break a contract, or do we have a service contract that we said we'll stay there for a certain number of years, or what?
Yes, we entered into a lease, a 10-year lease, and so we have notified of that with them. Actually, what we're working with them now is there was a term within that lease where if we left before that, we would pay for whatever's left on the cost to renovate. We've had some discussions with them. We think that may be forgiven, but that conversation is ongoing.
What was the term that we had to pass? After you that certain term, then you had.
It was just a 6-month notification.
6 month. Okay. And then last question is, at Kroger and Walmart, and them, I've not used them. I don't know. Can a customer walk up to the customer service desk and say, I want to pay my M.U.D bill? And the customer service representative for Baker's, Kroger's, Walmart, whatever it is, has the ability to take their money. And what do they do? Log into our system, or how does it get into our system from Walmart?
This payment processing would be with a third party that works with these retailers. Steph, I might need to phone a friend on the specifics of how this works. But yeah, we're working with a third party that works with them. A lot of other utilities work this way.
Stephanie Mueller, Vice President, Customer Service. What we have today is an agreement with a payment processor, Paymentus. And we're working with them because they have agreements with Walmart's and some of those other payment agencies. And so some of the payments that come in, there's a delay, maybe a day or two. But others are real time. And so if we're using our Paymentus processor with those agencies such as Walmart, those happen real time. And so if someone may have a disconnection notice, then that would immediately hit our system and we would rectify that issue.
Stephanie, help me out though. You say they're immediate or whatever through this. Does this other company, this intermediary, have access to our accounting system? So do they enter into our system that this customer paid, or how does our system know the customer's paid? Who has access to it? That's what I'm worried about.
Paymentus is the company that we use for all of our online payments. So we have regular transactions back and forth with them, and they give us a file and we update accounts. So that the company that Steph is talking about, we already do work with for all our online activity today.
So they give you the data, and M.U.D employees actually have access to our system.
That's right, their file, and then we post it to their account.
Okay.
This would not, this arrangement, we already have this in some form as it's presented right here. We do this, do we reach out to supermarkets right now to do this?
Yes. So
okay.
we have an agreement. We've had agreements for years with some local, mainly like First National Bank, some of the supermarkets, but we're looking at expanding that. And so we're using that payment processor, Paymentus, that has a bigger arm, and they're able to go to the Walmarts and places of that nature so that it would be easier for our customers. So like some of those areas on the map, we really had no like the Florence area in North Omaha had no payment processors available for those customers. Going with this new, some of these new methods, it will open that up and really bring that to the customer neighborhood.
So we're expanding the options that customers have. And my only concern, and it sounds like the customer service reps who are in Energy Plaza have been reallocated back into customer service in some capacity, so we're not having any reductions in force by reallocating or taking staff away from Energy Plaza.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there a supermarket or anything in Springfield that we could look at for those customers?
So yeah, absolutely. We can take a look at that. I don't know if there is a supermarket there. Same as like if you look out at UTAN, there's really not necessarily one out in that area. So there are a couple areas that we just don't necessarily have those options because some of those, there is either maybe not a bank that would agree, because that's part of it. It's like some of these agreements that we currently have, they have to agree to take that on. We'll approach them, but they may not want to take payments because they're just not equipped. So, but we can certainly look into that.
Thank you.
Sure.
One other quick question. Does our website list these places that we take so that employee says, a customer says, I want to drop mine off, where's the nearest one to me? They can go to our website and look at them?
Absolutely, yes.
So in real life, if I decided I wanted to pay my bill at Baker's when I'm going in to pick up milk, do I put
Eggs.
Well, I can't afford eggs, but I'm only going for milk. Do I write the check as usual, put it in the envelope, and then go to customer service and hand it off at customer service?
Check or cash, or...
Oh, you'll take cash as well?
I think in this case, the customers we're talking about are, a lot of it is cash. There's certainly credit card, but
Okay.
I think when we talk about our branch, I think I'm most concerned about the unbanked and those that want to pay in cash. So
hand it off to the
different
customer
forms, but
service
yes.
person. Okay, thank you.
And last question for me, if they have issues with their account or bill that they would otherwise have gotten service from at Energy Plaza, do they just then have to call in to our CSRs to walk them through that?
Correct, call in, or there's some online capability as well.
Okay.
And what's the time frame for transition to this?
Our hope is we go through as we bring these on and we transition out by the end of June.
Okay. I live across the street from Energy Plaza and see people trying to struggle into those. First of all, there aren't enough parking spaces. Then if it's between 9 and 9, they've got to plug the meter. There's sometimes language barriers. I think if we take the time between, April, May, June to communicate that, hi, you're here today, but don't be coming back, this is where you should look in the future. That'll, I think, be better, because it's every day. People are still on the Harney side trying to put things in that drop box. So that would be my scientific analysis, and absolutely to put it where people are going to be already is a good consideration.
If there's no questions, thank you for your time.
Okay. Excuse me, are there any members of the public who would like to address the board? All right, seeing none, we're going to, closed session is going to be held. That concludes the regular board agenda items. The board will now go into closed session for the purpose of discussing litigation, personnel, and real estate. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I guess that counts as a second discussion. Roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Sidzik?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to ask that all attendees, other than board members or designated staff members, please leave by the doors at the rear of the boardroom.
I make a motion, we go back into open session.
Second.
All right, discussion, roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Friend? Sidzik?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Do any directors or members of the public have any further comments to share? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Sidzik?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
We are adjourned.